I want to invite to the stage ALMEP's US Director, Kari Reid, who will welcome diplomatic guests, heads of mission, both to Israel and to the Palestinian people, for a conversation in light of the HRVP's comments and what we've heard earlier on today from President Macron and the wider diplomatic context we're looking at as we work towards Israeli-Palestinian peace. So over to you, Kari.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here for what I know will be a very compelling and incredibly timely conversation about the international community's role in advancing peace around the world. We're very fortunate to be joined by 4 diplomats whose leadership, vision, and lived experience bring sharp insight about the region and the role that diplomacy can play in resolving conflict. It's a real privilege to welcome Ambassador Seibert of Germany, Ambassador Schurman of the Netherlands, Ambassador Journès of France, and EU Representative Stutzman. Please join me in a round of applause to welcome them. For ease, I'm going to sit down. So we're going to get right to it. I'm going to actually start with EU Representative Stutzman. We've just heard from High Representative about the EU's major financial commitment to peace building. At the same time, as we've seen, the U.S. is scaling back on its support for civil society peace-building efforts, especially with the defunding of USAID's local operations. It's a very striking contrast, and we see that the EU is stepping up in a way that we haven't seen before. Can you share a little bit about what the EU's plans are with civil society actors, both through funding and other sorts of cooperation to help end the war and create a lasting peace in the region?
Yeah, thank you, Kari, and good morning, good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for being here. I think, let me just say from the outset, before getting into your precise question, that we're very thankful, I guess, as a community of diplomats for civil society to bring us all together. Because, I mean, if we want to win this battle, it's also a matter of being united. And civil society, I mean, I can tell from my work, and especially since October 7th, which is when I was posted here as the EU representative to the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, civil society has been a source of inspiration. It's been a source, I mean, as was said in the testimonies before, as Bernard Guetta said as well, it's the courage of civil society that allowed us also to move ahead, to go on, but also because civil society challenges us. And I guess this is what the High Representative said in her video address while she was announcing that indeed, which is welcome, that the EU is putting 18 million for civil society on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict issue. But what inspires us, and that's been inspiring us for decades, is that this complementarity between the diplomatic work and civil society. So it's not that this is of yesterday, of today. We didn't wait for the 7th of October. The EU has been engaging with civil society in the region for the last 3 decades. I think since 1998, through various financial instruments. But of course, we had to redouble this since October 7th. And because we believe that this is where the solution can come from. We need creative solutions. We need ideas coming from outside, from grassroots, bottom up. This is exactly what civil society is about. And that in complementarity with what we do. There isn't a single diplomatic initiative these days that doesn't have a civil society component. It will be the case in New York next month. This is where the EU stands. And I think Kaya Kallas said it. I mean, and she came here, she met civil society representatives. It's part of the solution. In terms of numbers, we announced the 18 million, which is more or less half of what will be devoted through the various programs, whether this is the European Foreign Policy Instrument, or whether it's the Initiative for Peace. 30 million more or less, which go through various programs, various organizations, in order to deconstruct the fake facts that we see, the fake perceptions as well, in order the eroding trust, but also to embolden those civil societies to fight those trends, I mean, which have been beautifully described before by Dalia and Khalil. And this is where we intend to act. Also in terms of media perception and training on media, on independent media, on independent reporting, basically civil society in all its components. And that's for the years ahead. And we didn't wait for the EU, for the US to defund to do that. It's a bit the question we get all the time these days. Are you going to replace the US? We will never replace the US. And we hope the US will come back on stage with us because it's needed. But in the meantime, we will move ahead. And it's been in the continuity. The previous High Representative was very keen on emboldening civil society. Kaja Kallas is continuing that trend, even reinforcing it. And this is exactly what we're looking for.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you for your leadership. It's really needed at this moment. So Ambassador Schurman, I'm going to bring you in next. Right now, the political reality on the ground is very grim. Deep distrust, painful levels of dehumanization, and very little belief among Israelis and Palestinians that a two-state solution is still possible. Against that backdrop, how do you see European countries stepping up to keep the two-state solution alive on the global agenda?
Thank you for that. Yes, thank you for the question. It's very topical indeed. And I think after all the previous speakers, I would like to echo what President Macron said. We are here in humility as well, and particularly because I think the suffering is so deep. There is this deep distrust, there is dehumanization, and the longer the war takes, the deeper that will get. But there's also very deep trauma from generation to generation. And in this environment, it really takes courage to talk about peace. And it takes courage to say it's time, and even there's no time to lose. So first and foremost, it's as an act of solidarity is to express our respect for civil society, for the Palestinian and Israeli people to have the courage to speak up and talk about peace and perceive a better future. And that reminds me of another French speaker, former president, whose speech in '95 I always refer to, who shared his experience and the European experience on how after centuries of war and animosity, it took, as he said, he was also raised in this sort of hatred and prejudice against the old enemy, which in his case was Germany. And he said we shouldn't transfer to the new generations that hatred, but we have to transfer the possibility of reconciliation that was given to us to those who in 1944 and 1945 had the guts, the courage to conceive a brighter future that is based on reconciliation and peace. And that's not easy because it means we have to overcome our pain, we have to overcome our suffering, we have to overcome our history, but there's no alternative. Because the only alternative is war. And so Mitterrand at the time said, I hand it over to you, the new generation, to save that peace and to secure that future. And I think that is, for us as European countries, an experience that we share. And from that experience is also a message to the people of Israel and Palestine to say that there is a way out. And the way out is a political just resolution. And I think that I take my hope from the fact that there's people in Israel and Palestine that still hope and have all the mental creativity to perceive ideas, conceive ideas on what that future could look like, and for us to support that, not only with statements, but also where possible with supporting those, and also providing legitimacy, but also where necessary pressure. And I'm proud that my minister this week marked the line to say that basically he asked the European High Representative to review the fundamental principles on which the cooperation between the EU and Israel is based, which is respect for human rights and democratic values, and see to what extent, to review to what extent Israel is living up to those fundamental principles and what consequences that will have for the friendship. And this is in an effort to make sure that we get back to a sustainable ceasefire that in the end leads to a sustainable and just resolution that will provide safety and security, peace and dignity, justice and self-determination to both Palestinians and Israelis. And that is, I think, the common practice we have as Europe to step up, be more outspoken, but also support those who know that it is possible and basically almost risk their lives to make sure that that opportunity is not lost. We use the opportunity to create that better future.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Ambassador Journès, I'm going to come to you next. I want to revisit what we've seen in the past through data, which is that support for a two-state solution rises significantly when it's tied to the idea of Saudi normalization. So with that in mind, we understand that France and Saudi Arabia are going to co-host a major conference in New York next month, focused on advancing exactly that kind of progress. So if you could share a little bit with us about what you hope France hopes to achieve through this conference, and how does that connect to the growing public appetite for a peace plan linked to normalization?
Thank you, Carrie. I'd say first thing, the idea to make that attempt came during the visit of, crystallized, I would say, during the visit of President Macron to Saudi Arabia last December in discussion with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Starting from first, what we've said this morning, unless we do something and we do it now, what's going to happen is war forever, which is a catastrophe on moral ground, detrimental to all of us, which is heavily damaging our own security interests, because what's happening here has consequences on security for France, for Europe, for Saudi Arabia, because now it has become a source of the instability of the region, and not only a place which is affected by the region. The second thing was that we were convinced that the ceasefire, the release of the hostages after the trauma of the anti-Semitic pogrom Israel endured in October 7 was fundamental, that nothing good, nothing positive could start unless there would be the release of the hostages and the lasting ceasefire. And that's the second point. And then the third is what we've just seen through the pollings. We need to propose to the Palestinian people and to the Israeli people another way that feels credible. And so when we are talking about that, that is, yes, putting together issues related to giving the Palestinian people what they want. A state of their own, which has to be recognized, and it's time. and this is on the table, it's no taboo to us, everybody knows it, on the perspective of normalization with Saudi Arabia and beyond. We're also talking about many other Arabs, Muslim countries in the world, which are very big players. And the conference will then need to get into the substance of what that means. So technically it's going to be 17 and 18 of June. We'll have separate baskets of conversation to discuss, okay, we're talking about security assurances and guarantees for Israel, which means regional defense cooperation issues also. What do we say about that? We say, what's going to be an independent Palestinian state? What does it imply for reform? What does it imply in terms of being contiguous, economically viable? How do we support it? And then there are other issues like the one just raised that needs to be put together. My feeling towards it, I'm starting more and more to believe it can work actually. First, as a career diplomat, I can recognize the moment when I see the big boat of our own diplomacy starting to work full speed. And that's what's happening. In all our embassies, we are demarching. I'm very proud when I see that my country can do that. It looks like what we did before the Paris Agreement. We're talking to everybody. At some moments, the teams are saying, okay, here, it needs to be the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Here, it needs to be the President. Here, we need to talk with Parliament members. It's a step-by-step process, and it's gaining steam. And also that there is curiosity, because basically it's the only thing on the table. So it came at the right time. And as we see what's unraveling right now in Gaza, as everybody said, this fear, this pain, this darkness, we need to see something else. I came myself in this country, which I know from a long time, for which I have deep feelings. Israel is also a place full of light. And we don't like to see our Israeli friends in that dark place. I wish to be able to see the children of my friends, which are now considering the army, having another perspective. And it's about putting the way forward for that. So it needs to be with a pathway, not unlimited, not unraveling again, we've done that for 30 years, but with benchmarks, credible steps of what can come ahead.
Thank you. It's very exciting, and I want a round of applause for this upcoming conference. We're all really looking forward to the outcomes of that. So, Ambassador Seibert, we're going to conclude with one question for you, I know, because we have to move on for a lunch. One of the things that LMEP has recently done some research where we found that nearly 2/3 of Israeli adults would at least accept, and many would actively support, a Saudi normalization deal that includes recognition of a Palestinian state, especially if it's backed by strong international leadership. Interestingly, President Trump was named as particularly influential in swaying Israeli support for such a deal. So given the U.S.'s influence in shaping Israeli opinion, what kind of coordinated approach would you like to see between European governments and the United States to advance normalization efforts that include a Palestinian statehood?
Okay, I don't want to stand between you and lunch for too long. Just one thing to Frédéric, which is important to me, because we just got a new government. When that big ship of French diplomacy really starts, sailing under full steam, I really hope that we will be able to make it sail in unison with that German ship of diplomacy, because we know from the past experience that when our two countries share the same goal, the same direction, and this I hope will be true also for the Middle East with our new government, then this activity has a lot more weight, and we will get to our destination better. Secondly, and that's still not an answer to your question, I want to say something that's been on my mind all morning in this beautiful opening ceremony. I love the role of civil society. I think you are doing a wonderful job here, but I thought all morning what I heard on that stage, you need to also say in the Knesset. It is very important for civil society in this country to develop an aspiration to become political, even party political. I think it is good to have the projects, the initiatives, the demonstrations. It's not only good, it's admirable. But at the end of the day, political discussions are being held in the Knesset, and political decisions are being held in the Knesset. And I wish that the actors up there, or some of them, would have this ambition to play their part in there, because that's going to change things politically. Okay, now the question about President Trump. President Trump is, of course, with his new administration, quite a challenge to Europeans and to countries like mine. But of course, our reaction must be, where can we find common ground? And you mentioned his aspiration to have a deal with Saudi Arabia. We know what Saudi Arabia is saying, under which conditions they would be willing to include Israel and do things of benefit to Israel in this deal and normalize. And we have been advocating for a long time with the Israeli government to give these Saudi conditions a good listen, to not brush them off the table right away. We see the historical benefit that Israel has from the Abraham Accords. The benefit of normalization with Saudi Arabia would be at least as big, if not bigger. But of course, it comes at a price. Now, it's a good thing that the condition that is being linked to this, which is make meaningful, tangible, and specific steps towards creating a Palestinian state, which is not going to happen next week, and maybe not even next year, but steps must and can be taken. That is not a condition that works against the interests of Israel. On the contrary, it works, in our deep conviction, in the interest of Israeli security, which, speaking for my country, is our starting point in every thought we have. We always think what is good for Israeli security. And we always come to the conclusion that Israel's security is linked with the security of the Palestinians. These two come together. One will not be achieved without the other. So in that sense, we will keep advocating with our Israeli friends that they should look at the possibilities that lie in a Saudi deal. And yes, the Trump administration can be an ally in that.
Wonderful. So I know I share with many in the room today. I could honestly listen to all four of you all day. We really appreciate your insights and your commitment to peace. Thank you so much for coming today, for speaking on this panel, for supporting civil society, and for your leadership. Really, we are so, so grateful. So if I could have everyone join me in having a final round of applause for this excellent panel.